Dylann makes the claim that blacks are violent, low IQ having losers. Meanwhile, he himself uses drugs, and despite the violent behavior of blacks he has so much disdain for, he goes into a church and executes black people in a prayer meeting. So if you're acting out the same kind of characteristics that you accuse blacks of, Mr. Roofy, does that mean that you're trying to be black? Hey, maybe you and Rachel Dolezal should get together. Roofy and Dolezal. Together you both sound like your own farm party.
I think what's happening. Propaganda.
So, Mr. Roofy, I call him Mr. Roofy. Anyway, according to your manifesto, if it's you who wrote it, somebody was thinking this mess. I can understand you having a problem with blacks being violent. I got a problem with anybody being senselessly violent myself. But since you targeted black folks as violent, let's just stay in that room for a second. I share your disdain for blacks being violent. Blacks have the highest violent crime rate against each other, the highest abortion rate. Statistically, blacks lead the chart in treating each other the worst. And blacks who defend this and enable this behavior while saying stop the violence are considered authentic and down with their black people. And if you say there is no excuse for this and want to get blacks to break free from this mentality, you're a sellout and they will hate you. So like you, I do not dig the aspect of the black population that gives in to violent behavior, gang activity, drugs, prostitution, etc. So if you have a problem with such behavior, why didn't you seek them out to draw your guns on? Why didn't you go into the hood looking for the real menaces to society? I'll tell you. Because you're a confused hypocrite and a coward. That's why. Because they got guns too. So you go into a place where blacks are not being a menace, they're unarmed and praying, and you unload on them. Therefore, being the very thing you claim to hate. Okay. I mean, you even claim to hate the American flag. You seem to have something deeply in common with those flag stompers who are black. Y'all could be friends. You got these mind-rotted liberals that believe that infringing more upon the Second Amendment is the answer. Meanwhile, they overlook the fact that another person took a gun and avoided going shoot-happy in an area where people do have guns, and instead went into a place where they weren't carrying guns. When I first heard about this, I said, just answer this first with prayer, before reacting with anything else that could very well cause another uproar, that could result in more burning cities and death. Pray for clarity first, and then the families and friends responded to the shooter with forgiveness. And not only did they show Mr. Roofy who the real perpetrator of violence was, but despite those who say prayer does nothing, their prayers manifested as an action that threw a wet blanket over what surely could have gone up in flames. Roofy's actions didn't do anything to show that blacks are more violent. His actions were counterproductive to his demented cause, in making the case that the solution to America is to kill blacks. What he did prove is that violence manifests through anybody. It's conditioned, not genetic. He sees blacks as violent, but overlooks Nazi Germany. I heard they were white. He overlooks Stalin and Lenin, who were white. The manifesto praises the Asians and sees them as worthy of making great allies for whites. While the Japanese have killed over 30 million Asians during World War II, Mao Zedong had upward of 70 million people murdered. But blacks, in the author's mind, are the personification of violent people. I make no excuses for the violent behavior that is too prevalent in the black community. But violence is not something exclusive to us. It's not genetic. Everybody is proven to have that potential. But I'm disappointed that too many in the black community have given itself to the conditioning that keeps them in a state of the discontent they're in. Again, that's programming, not genetics. In further reading of this manifesto, it tries to maintain this idea that blacks are less than human or another breed, a more violent breed at that. The writer says there are personality traits within human families and within different breeds of cats or dogs. So why not within the races? A horse and a donkey can breed and make a mule, but they are still two completely different animals. Just because we can breed with other races doesn't make us the same. Actually, that analogy is way wrong, and I thought Mr. Roofy's white DNA was supposed to assure him a higher IQ. A horse and a donkey can reproduce together, yes, but their offspring will be born sterile and cannot perpetuate their own species. But no matter what ethnicity you are, we can reproduce, and that offspring of amalgamation can reproduce with a person of another ethnicity, and so on, and so on, and so on. Why? Because we're designed to. Because we're the same species. If we weren't, we wouldn't be able to reproduce, or the offspring would be born sterile. As the Bible tells us, his living creations will only reproduce after their own kind, Genesis 1:24. Anyway, the writer goes on to say, I have no choice. I am not in a position to alone go into the ghetto and fight. As I said earlier, the writer admits he's a cowardly hypocrite. To continue, I chose Charleston because it is the most historic city in my state, and at one time had the highest ratio of blacks to whites in the country. We have no skinheads, no real KKK, no one doing anything but talking on the internet. Well, someone has to have the bravery to take it to the real world, and I guess that has to be me. Did he say real KKK? I'd like to take this opportunity to remind those who keep trying to tie this to Republicans that the real KKK were Democrats. That's the KKK he's lamenting over. He wants to follow in the footsteps of those church-bombing cross burners before him. And that KKK he admires so much were Democrats. He also complains that we have no skinheads. Oh, you mean that wannabe Nazi movement that spawned over here? You know the real Nazis were socialists, right? Something the Democrats have a great affinity for. I have to point this stuff out because Democrats keep trying to tie this evil to Republicans. Now, the liberals, of course, try to insist that the parties have switched sides, and it's the Republicans who are now supported by racists. We'll explore that in the next ZoNation. In the meantime, if you want to get more of my take on that, grab a copy of my audiobook, Weapon of Mass Destruction. And no, my book has nothing to do with what's going to happen to Mr. Roofy while he's in prison.